IPOs this is a month. Okay. 2007 was lower, and 2008 was much lower. 2007 was 101, 2008 0, but same for the United States. 2008 is kind of a weird year. 2009 is really going to be a weird year. Anybody graduate in 2009? Too bad. I graduated, by the way, at the middle of the last huge recession, undergraduate in 1981. And the prime rate, does everybody know what the prime rate is? That's the interest rate, you know, the banks charge, was 20%. Inflation was 18%. You know. And unemployment now here is something like, in the United States, 6.8, it was 10.1. It was a really bad economy. You know, but I got a job. At General Motors. I got 3 jobs, actually. I turned down the wrong one. I worked for, I took the job at a bank. I should have gone work for General Motors, right? There's some risks, though. Japanese is the language of Japan. You can't do business there if you don't speak Japanese. It's just that simple. There's no hope otherwise. Okay, and people argue with me about this for sure. They're wrong. Really, you just can't do business there. That's the language spoken. If you spoke only English, first of all, you'd be taken advantage of. Second of all, it puts you in what's called the English bubble, and you just kind of move around this world of where they speak English, and it's a very small part of the country. In spite of reform, and this is important, a foreigner going to the courts is a long process. So if somebody says, you know, does you wrong, and you say, okay, I'm going to take you to court, and your passport isn't Japanese, that's going to be, it's not unfair, but it's a long process, and you may want to become a citizen of Japan just because of the amount of time it's going to take. As an outside competitor, you are an outsider, okay, particularly if you're a foreigner doing business there, you will be competed with, and you will be competed with harshly. Right? There's some politeness goes out the door. And we had all kinds of things happen to us. We sold wine, and for example, we sold wine to one department store, and one of the competitors bought the rights to hang beef jerky in front of all of our wines on the shelf. And in another store, they went through and pulled the price tags off all of our stuff. And they published a story in one of the newspapers about how our warehouse in Yokohama was not refrigerated, which is true enough because we didn't have a warehouse in Yokohama. Lots of things like that. I mean, it was really, you know, it was something else. It was very harsh, and they have to be prepared for that. And the IPO and VC market for this year is not the greatest one, but I don't know where it is great. So, you know, it is risky this year. My view is to get out there. The climate for startups has changed. It's easier to start it. The governance system is similar and parallels our system. The institutions is for getting money and accounting for what you did with it and why you lost it and dealing with the lawsuits when your shareholders do that. There aren't so many lawsuits in Japan, but it's been increasing a lot, particularly labor lawsuits. And I don't have really good numbers on that, just my friends who are lawyers tell me this kind of stuff, so that's kind of happening. There are open routes now for exits, IPOs, buyouts, and mergers. There's firms that do those things. And it's, you know, it becomes a process to do them. An important thing is great new companies always are formed in the middle of severe economic recessions. You know, the great companies are being formed now. Whether, I'm not sure why. There's probably literature about this, but maybe it's necessity. I don't know. But great companies are being formed now. You know. Thank you very much. Any questions? Or are we done? Yeah.
How did you first become interested in Japan?
I can answer that existentially. You think there are always, I don't know. The truthful answer is there are always Japanese stuff around my house. So my parents were married in Japan. I was born a couple weeks after they came back from Japan, so I was probably made in Japan. I was born in Detroit. By the way, I was born in the same hospital. I just found this out. I do work for Francis Ford Coppola and his minor. And I just found out that the reason his middle name is Ford is because he was born in Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, which is, by the way, where I was born. Anyway, little trivia, there you go. And
The existentials.
oh, yeah. And then, then there was an existence problem. My scholarship at the University of Michigan was at the Space Studies program. And I was doing economic work on the commercialization of space. And I was sitting in my apartment watching this Columbia vehicle go up and it exploded. And then a couple months later, they canceled all the scholarships. And so I stabbed around and there was a Japan scholarship available to study, funded by General Motors, to kind of study the enemy. And I went into graduate school. I changed my emphasis to Japanese economics. And then was going to take, the language ability off my resume because I got tired of being sent. But eventually had the idea that the distribution system was changing in Japan and nobody else was paying attention to it. Everybody was paying attention to China and India. And we just, we founded the company and it just took off. It just kind of worked out. But it's a great, I think it's a wonderful place to do business. If you know the rules, which are fundamentally evolving, just being a polite person, you don't have to learn any special politeness, just be considerate. And you are determined and sincere. It's an honest place to do business. In other words, you're not going to, the ethic there is similar to the Midwestern United States in that sense. In other words, there are parts of the country where if you do business and they take advantage of you, they look at that as your fault. Like you were too stupid to understand that I was ripping you off. There are parts of the world that are like that. But, Japan is not like that. There's people not tending to try to rip you off unless you're trying to rip them off. It's also very, very smart. It's the behavior of the consumer is not mysterious, I don't think. We understood that if you gave a product to people at good value, they would buy the product if you made it accessible to them. And I don't see how that's different anywhere in anywhere else in the world. It worked just fine. You just have to clearly understand what you're doing. I think the barrier most people have are two things. I think one, they go there without good language skills, and I think they don't listen. And they come back, nobody will listen to me. Well, that's right, you don't talk to them. They probably were just smiling. I heard that so many times. When I went there and talked to them, and they were smiling. I said, well, did you speak Japanese? No, I spoke English. What was your first clue? And then the other thing I think that people don't understand is that it's a perfectly, thoroughly developed economy. There are competitors, fierce ones, smart ones, with really, really smart people who are making a living running the competitive companies. All right, so there's not like these, it's a very, very, you have to be on your game, in other words. I think you can understand you have to be language and on your game. We did it by, at the same way you compete in the United States, which is we found a key that was limiting the large competitors. And that key was, and think about this carefully, the competitors, people like Suntory and Mercian, large liquor dealers, they had a problem. They had owned stores. In other words, they sold their wine, say, in stores. And they also sold wines in a restaurant channel, also sold wines online. But they were slaves to that payment structure. In other words, they couldn't, if they needed to reduce prices, they would change that entire channel. They would start competing against their own channels. So we knew we could challenge them on price, and not that they couldn't afford to go down in price, but we knew they were fighting against their own channel, so we went right down in price. Not because a stupid move, if we buy it cheaper, people will buy it. We thought we'd put our competitors in a double bind by capturing margin and lowering price, and it worked reasonably well. So anyway, that's why I like it. Yeah.
Did you start the company with an American partner or Japanese?
No, one of the things we did very, very deliberately was we started them with no partners. One of the great myths, I thought at the time, it was confirmed later, and I still believe it even stronger,